International organizations, including the World Health Organization, call on Israel to allow humanitarian aid into northern Gaza to rescue the thousands dying under the rubble. The government of Egypt met on Thursday with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran to discuss the growing tensions in the Middle East. And the United Nations affirmed that the resurgence of the armed conflict in Sudan is forcing the displacement to Chad of at least 25,000 people in the month of October alone. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Several international organizations, including the World Health Organization, called on Israel to allow humanitarian aid into northern Gaza to rescue the thousands dying under the rubble and to distribute food and water. For 13 days, the genocidal troops have been besieging the north of the Palestinian enclave. Israel has dropped 75,000 tons of explosives on Gaza. The north has been reduced to rubble that crushes thousands of people who survive while waiting for rescue groups that work with their hands removing tons of rubble because Israel prevents the entry of fuel. First Afana, head of the emergency services in the north of Gaza, assures that people are dying of hunger and that Israel is destroying all that is alive. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has launched a second polio vaccination campaign in Gaza, targeting over 500,000 children. The campaign faces significant challenges due to restricted access to northern Gaza, with only 1 out of 54 UN missions successfully facilitated in the first half of October. The war has damaged medical facilities and the sewage system, exacerbating the health crisis, and the WHO is calling for unhindered access to deliver humanitarian aid, highlighting severe shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. International organizations demand an end to the Israeli blockade to address the escalating health emergency and prevent further disease spread. And meanwhile, the Islamic resistance in Lebanon carried out 3 operations against Israeli military equipment and facilities on Thursday. Hezbollah has hit several Merkava tanks and bombed Zionist military installations and formations in the Shiva farms. In response to these military attacks, the occupier has again targeted several homes and civilian areas in southern Lebanon, especially in the areas of Kanarit, Deir Kanun, Al-Nar, and Al-Rayyan. They have also repeated attacks against facilities of the United Nations Interim Force, from where they denounced the attack on one of its watchtowers in Kafr Kila. In this context, also the UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Yanin Hanis Plashkert, described violations of international humanitarian law as unacceptable following the latest Israeli attacks on the southern town of Nabatea. Through a statement, the special envoy denounced that the bombardment perpetrated by Tel Aviv's regime fighter planes against the city left at least 5 people dead, although the figure could rise as the debris is cleared. Likewise, Henin Plashkert warned that civilian suffering is reaching unprecedented levels and demanded a diplomatic solution capable of promoting regional stability. For its part, the UN Refugee Agency estimated that the number of dead in Lebanon has so far reached 2,200. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, at a press conference, Dr. Abinasir Abubakar, representative of the WHO in Lebanon, warned of a very high risk of the spread of cholera in the country after the detection of the first case in the nation.
What we are seeing is actually, the first case has been confirmed, but we've been talking about the risk of cholera for many months, actually, because of the deteriorating water and sanitation situations for the refugees, but also the host communities. As you know, Lebanon for the last few years has been impacted by the financial crisis. And most of the public services, whether it's the electricity, the water establishment, and many of these actually have been, the services has been impacted very severely. And now what we are worrying actually is that displaced people for the current conflict actually have reached to the north. And if the cholera outbreak or the cholera spread to the new displaced people, it might spread very fast because some of those communities from the south and from the Beirut didn't have any cholera immunity for the last 30 years, and the risk of spread is very high. And I think that's.
And the government of Egypt met on Thursday in Cairo with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, to discuss the growing tensions in the Middle East. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and the head of the Egyptian Foreign Ministry, Badr Abdelati, met with the Iranian representative to discuss the efforts to reduce the Israeli aggression in Gaza and Lebanon. President el-Sisi stressed his call to end the Israeli war and prevent the conflict from expanding in the region. He also called for an end to the escalation in Lebanon and human rights violations in the West Bank, and to ensure the delivery of necessary humanitarian aid. And now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Wednesday, the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, said as a goal for the 6-year term, 2025-2031, that 70% of the country's budget will be allocated to the people's power. He said this at an event held at the Teresa Carreño Theater in Caracas, the country's capital, in the presence of coffee farmers, organizations of popular power, and representatives of the Brazilian landless movement, the MST. The head of state emphasized that the objective is to promote a productive homeland with new models of management and production. The Bolivarian leader recognized, after evaluating the large popular consultation process that have taken place, the management capabilities of the communities.
I am setting the goal as it has to be, Madam Vice President, Minister Angel Prado, the goal in these next 6 years of popular government with the people as president from January 10, 2025 to January 10, 2031 is that 70% of the country's resources go directly to popular power through the new mechanisms of consultation, sovereign decision of the people at the base level.
I said last week and I ratified. Full as the full moon, I have nothing to decide when it comes to supporting someone in Colombia. I have nothing to decide, because that is decided. I will never prefer Uribe over Petro. I will never prefer Duque over Petro. I will never prefer Pastrana over Petro. I will never prefer Santos over Petro. I will never prefer Vicky Dávila over Petro. That is narco-paramilitarism, and President Petro has tried to settle that country, closing the way for 4 years. 4 years of attacks against drug trafficking has its impacts, especially in the pockets of drug traffickers, in their checkbook.
Tiene su impacto, sobre todo en el bolsillo de los narcotraficantes.
Meanwhile, in Colombia, the government of President Gustavo Petro filed a bill to coordinate the indigenous jurisdiction and the national judicial system. This is an initiative led by the Minister of Justice, Ángela María Buitriago, and the President of the Superior Council of the Judiciary, Diana Remolinos. This is the first recognition of the due process of 116 indigenous justice systems in Colombia. It also represents an important step forward in the regulation of Article 246 of the political constitution of the country, which recognizes that indigenous peoples have the right to be judged under their own authorities and procedures. And in Bolivia, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal warned about new obstacles that are being deployed to prevent the country from electing the highest authorities of the judiciary in December. Our correspondent Freddy Morales with the details.
The judicial elections, a year late, must be held next December 1st and are in the hands of the Supreme Electoral Court, but new obstacles have arisen. Two people who were not qualified as candidates have requested the judiciary to halt the process.
We are concerned because we see that there is a double discourse, a double standard that is leading to a desire to overturn the 2024 judicial elections. We as an assembly are endorsed, but there are practically two people who have presented this appeal who are trying to paralyze or overturn this electoral process.
The legislature, which must carry out the pre-selection of candidates, took almost 2 years in this process, which was paralyzed several times due to lawsuits from those who were left out.
There is a democratic institutional fragility that is being deepened. We cannot naturalize. It is not normal for authorities to be interim indefinitely. Because this affects democracy, affects the legitimacy of the institutions and affects the credibility of the state before society itself.
The appeal of those who were left out of the race now takes place when the elections are halfway to be held, in charge of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal. The election will be held on December 1st.
I have been involved in electoral processes for the last 10 years, and I have never seen that an electoral process has so many obstacles. We are very concerned about the lack of legal certainty in the work carried out by the electoral body, both for the voters and the candidates.
Two lawsuits to paralyze the process were admitted by judges in the cities of Cobija and Trinidad in the last hours. The Electoral Tribunal appealed to the Constitutional Court to annul these decisions and continue with the electoral process.
We would not like to think that this is a judicial blow to the execution of the electoral processes. We hope that those who are going to review these rulings will act to protect the right of the Bolivian people to decide, to go to the polls. The people have decided and want to go to the polls on December 1st.
Bolivia is one of the few countries that elects its highest judicial authorities by popular vote. Since its new constitution came into force in 2009, these authorities have been elected twice, although with little public support. Judicial authorities serve for 6 years and cannot be re-elected to the same position.
Freddy Morales, teleSUR, Bolivia.
And we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you will be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Wednesday, Haiti's Council of Government adopted a resolution condemning the massive and discriminatory deportations carried out by the Dominican Republic against its nationals. The resolution denounces a climate of growing xenophobia in which expulsions of Haitian nationals from Dominican territory are taking place without observing and respecting legal procedures. The meeting, urgently convened by Prime Minister Gary Conil, also helped to plan immediate responses that guarantee respect for human rights of its nationals. In this context, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights condemned the attacks made on organizations defending the rights of Haitians in Santo Domingo. And in Panama, the 20th anniversary of the creation of the Working Group on the United States which is part of the Latin American Council of Social Studies, also known as CLACSO, was celebrated. The opening keynote address was led by Argentine sociologist Atilio Boron, who addressed the crisis of hegemony facing the U.S. government. The sociologist questioned the current U.S.-controlled media system, which is being used to misdirect the attention of the international community. He also pointed out that Washington seeks to focus attention on Venezuelan affairs in order to justify aggression against the Venezuelan people. The activity was held in homage to the Panamanian sociologist Marco Gandasegui, who was one of the precursors of the creation of the study group and its main promoter.
A media system highly oligopolized and controlled by the United States. And if you have any doubts, check the front pages of today's Latin American newspapers, for example. They all say the same thing. The problems are all the same. At the international level, in the midst of the genocide in Gaza, the attack on defenseless civilians in Lebanon, the horrors of the war in Ukraine, the aggression of NATO against China, the problem is Maduro. If one goes through and reviews the Mercurial, the Argentinian newspapers, the Brazilian newspapers, it seems that there is only one actor, or two actors on the international scene, Donald Trump and Biden a little bit, and Maduro.
Donald Trump y Biden un poquito y Maduro. ¿Por qué? Bueno, porque la
Why? Well, because the vision of the empire is clearly to focus our attention on the issue of Venezuela, to justify the aggression against Venezuela, to justify the war that has been waged against Venezuela for at least 8 years since 2016, with more than 930 unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela.
And in other news, the United Nations affirmed that the resurgence of the armed conflict in Sudan is forcing the displacement to Chad of at least 25,000 people in the month of October. According to the report, Chad is hosting more than 600,000 displaced Sudanese people, with one of the highest influx being registered during the last week. In addition, the UN warned about the number of internally displaced people, which rounds the 8 million, of which almost 40,000 were registered in the first 2 weeks of the present month of October. The displacements are caused by increased hostilities between the armed forces and armed groups, which have generated insecurity in the population and a state of social instability. And we go now to the United Kingdom, as for the first time in history, a painting created by an AI-powered humanoid robot will be sold at a major auction house. The 2.2-meter high portrait titled AI God depicts Alan Turing, the pioneering mathematician and father of modern computing. The artwork, created by the humanoid AI robot Ada, is expected to fetch between £100,000 and £150,000 during Sotheby's online digital art sale scheduled from October 31st to November 7th. Developed by Aidan Meller, the AI specialist from the University of Oxford and Birmingham, Ada uses advanced AI algorithm cameras in its eyes and bionic hands to produce its works. This sale marks a significant milestone in the integration of technology and art.
I'm really pleased to have my artwork in the auction at Sotheby's. And I'm pleased because this work was also displayed at the United Nations. I aim my art to spark conversations about the role of new technologies, to further the aim of the UN, to use AI for good.
It's been a really exciting time. Obviously this is a special moment. Ada makes history as the first humanoid realistic robot artist to submit work to a major auction house. It's called AI God, the painting. That's very significant. It's quite a provocative title. Why is that? Because we're absolutely seeing that we're going into this kind of post-human world. What does that mean? Well, at the moment, all humans are making decisions about all aspects of life. But we are increasingly migrating over to the algorithms making those decisions.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.